there, and welcome back to another video. This week I'm going to be trying out a new art supply that I purchased recently. So I've been off and on ordering stuff from Wish since like, I don't know, 6-7 months ago, and I've been doing it just because I find that it's an inexpensive way to try out like little fancy art supplies that you see online that you wouldn't really necessarily be able to afford if you paid like 20 or 30 bucks for them on Amazon. But if you buy them on Wish for like $1 plus $5 shipping, that's $6 for something that would normally cost 20 or 30. So I've been just trying weird things off of Wish, getting like more pencil cases, more storage stuff, as well as getting like different types of pens, different color pens, like different types of color pencils. Like I tried to buy some watercolor pencils and they didn't really work, so I just use them as normal color pencils that aren't very pigmented. But yeah, it's just I've been slowly accumulating more stuff over time. But so I decided to try to order there was this thing that was doing the rounds on the internet, I think like maybe a year ago. It was called a glass dip pen. I know Bailey J's done a video about it. The first time I saw a video about it was from this other channel, and I'll try to leave a link in the description, but I might not find the exact video. But so I found it interesting when I was trying to find like a dip pen with different types of like nibs, because there's different nibs for dip pens. There's like wider ones, smaller ones, like round tip ones. There's a bunch of different ones. I was trying to find one because I've only really had one dip pen and it was like very cheap, very small. I was trying to find other ones. When I was looking for them, I found glass dip pens for like fairly cheap. So I decided to buy one and I got it I think like a month later. My mum was like obsessed with it, and if you follow my Instagram you might have seen the story that I posted the first time I actually tried it without a sketch. But here I wanted to try it like as an actual illustration. So on the left I did a like sketch off of a reference photo of like a pose that I might want to try out, and then on the right I was trying to like recreate it in pencil, because on the left it was in a prismacolor kohl erase, and then on the right I was using just my regular mechanical pencil because it's easier to erase. It doesn't leave as much of a mark after you erase it. But it wasn't really working out, so you're going to see me start over fairly soon. I really didn't like how it ended up looking, even though I really liked how loose the first one looks. I wanted to like just crop it and like zoom it in, which in digital art would be like 2 steps, but in traditional is you have to start all over again if you don't want to, you know, scan it, trace it, or like use those sheets of paper that have like graphite layer to like trace it onto it. So here I'm starting over on a new sheet, and this is the one that I do end up liking and inking, which in hindsight I do enjoy that I did the illustration, because I wanted to do it on the right piece of paper on my sketchbook instead of on the left piece of paper, because I felt like because the left one has like it like bounces up and forth a bit and I have to clip it and it's not as stable. But in hindsight, like after it happened, I'm glad that it was on the left piece of paper, because otherwise I would have like smudged it with my hand a lot, because I'm right-handed. So, and also having, oh see, there's my thumbs up of like, I'm liking how this sketch is going, let's move forward. Yeah, so if I'd done it on the right piece of paper it would smudge a lot more, and because I got to do it on the left I could also use the right as like a tester piece of paper to like make sure, like control the amount of ink in the dip pen basically, because the dip pen works, it's like a cone of glass that has like spiral grooves in it, which lets the ink sit inside of it. The way a regular dip pen works is that it's got like this kind of concave shape that holds the liquid and then a little point that lets it trickle out, while this one works that it has the spiral grooves. But there is such a thing as having the ink the pen have too much ink inside of it. So I always, like after dipping it, wanted to try a couple test marks just to make sure that I wouldn't accidentally completely flood the area I'm trying to ink with a delicate line. I wouldn't get like this giant blotch of ink, which is a problem when you're not very experienced with dipping in these pens, and I'm not all that experienced, so it was a lot of trial and error. The character I'm sketching, it doesn't really matter, but it's my character Zeke. I just wanted to do something simple, so drawing one of my original characters and inking them I thought would be a nice just guinea pig for this sort of thing. I really didn't want to try to think of it too much, but I did end up liking a lot how his face angle looked, how his expression looked, and just the way that his clothes came out. And there's always a worry when you're like trying a new art supply, especially if it's such a permanent supply like an ink or a paint. There's a worry that you're going to ruin a very good sketch. But the thing, my philosophy behind it is that if you've sketched it once, you can sketch it again. So I try really not to concern myself with, oh, I'm gonna ruin a really good sketch. And it was really hard for me at first to do that because I'm primarily a digital artist, and in digital art you can always undo, and you have like backup files, and you have like duplicated versions of the layers that you worked on, and you do have like a bunch of layers that you do work on, so you can always backtrack, and you can never really ruin by overworking if you've like duplicated your things properly. Like if that's a concern, it's very easy to like make it so it doesn't happen. While in traditional, like unless you like, as I did a little basic sketch and then I transferred it to a new sketch, that might be a technique to preserving a good sketch in like quotations, but not really. I don't think so, because it's like I'm not really, I mean, I do like the pose and I might reference it again if I want to use this pose again, but at the same time it's like just move forward. So here I am showing off the pen. It's got this nice little like flower inlaid into it, and that's the ink that I'm using. That's a fairly new pot of ink. It's I was just like peeling it off and opening it first dip. And it was because I had used up my old pot of ink. Like it was already like running low because I've had it for years, but I used it up completely over Inktober, so I got a new one. And because I did so much ink stuff in Inktober, I've sort of taken not like a complete break, so I've still used my fine liners and my high-tech C and all those sort of things. I've used them a lot, but I just tried to like tone down the inking a little bit because I got not burnt out, but I was like I need to like improve my other skills a bit. So my impressions of this thing is that the lines were a lot thicker than I would have imagined them to be, and especially compared to like, they didn't feel like they'd been as thick when I tested it earlier, but I think that's also because I used another type of ink when I did it last time, because when I first tested it out, I was still at my parents' place because I'd had it shipped to my parents' house and I was visiting them for the weekend, and I used a pot of ink that I had lying around at their place, and that pot of ink is old, like very, very, very old, like at least 10 years old. It wasn't even a pot of ink that I'd bought myself. It was a pot of ink that my brother had gotten for the sake of like, why not have some ink? But yeah, didn't end up using it ever. So he just gave it to me and I used it like in an emergency because I didn't find it to be all that opaque, and I also thought like it like over time got a lot more like less liquidy and more like a paint rather than an ink, and that was probably why the lines came out thinner, because it was more viscous. That's a weird word, viscous, but like yeah, that ink was a lot more viscous than this one. This one's brand new. I did shake it up, but it was like extremely liquidy. It was like, I felt like it was even more liquidy than like not liquidy, but more thinner than water even. So that's why I feel like it ended up getting a lot thicker lines. And then another thing that I noticed about this is that this Sketchbook's paper is definitely not a good paper for this kind of ink. It's like, yeah, this paper can't really hold water at all, and since this ink is very watery, even though I'm applying it in thin lines, later on I go thickening it and it's still like, I didn't wait for it to dry in between necessarily. Like I tried not to smudge it, but I wasn't really concerned with, like, if you've seen my watercolor painting video or the oopsies, I wasn't really concerned with that kind of an oopsie where a color bleeds into another color area because the other color area was still wet, because I was just doing like outlines and lines, and if I was gonna I was just gonna use black, so a new line that I put down ends up spreading into something that I've already put down. It's just gonna be more black on black, like so. But what happened was that this paper started like absorbing it more, and so when it absorbs it, it kind of like spread out. So you can't really tell with the zoomed out, or you can sort of tell if you look closely, but you can't really necessarily see it the way that I saw it because the camera is fairly pulled back. But I did notice that the lines would kind of like just spread more than I would have assumed them to do, and that's just because when you put ink down through this method rather than a fine liner, there's a lot more ink going down per line, while in a fine liner or a brush pen and stuff like that's more controlled. I feel like it would be even worse if instead of using a brush pen I'd use an actual brush. Like, I really wouldn't try that with this sketchbook. I've tried it with other sketchbooks of mine, but yeah, I really wouldn't try it with this one. And this is the sketchbook that I got off of Redbubble, by the way. So if you're looking for a little like journal to write down, they offer like lined and squared little books off on Redbubble as well. So if you're looking for a little like bullet journaling maybe, or just to write notes or something like that, and you want it to look kind of cute, then by all means get one off of Redbubble. But I wouldn't really recommend it if you're like a multimedia kind of. If you're just using like pencil, it takes graphite really well, but it doesn't necessarily take color pencil really well because you can't layer, and I've got a video around that on my channel. I think it's called First Color Pencil Drawing of 2019 or something like that. And yeah, so I wouldn't really recommend trying to be too adventurous if you get a sketchbook off of Redbubble, because the paper doesn't really take too much. And so there was this thing that I discovered that you can do with these, and you can sort of do it with like regular dip pens or fountain pens. And like, I only really remember that afterwards when I was talking to one of my professors about working with fountain pens or dip pens, that when you turn the fountain pen around, you have the little line where the ink sits, and if you like run that parallel to the paper, you can get like a fairly thick line based off of that. But the way that this pen works is because the ink sits in the spirals that go all the way along the top. If you like angle it down, so you know when you draw like a tilted pencil, you can get like a gradiated area of shading. So if you tilt down this pen, you can also get like a really thick line, which is how I did the shading on, like the solid shading on his pants and on his back arm, which was by tilting down the pen so that a lot of ink could like just slide. It wasn't just on the tip, it was along the sides as well. So I thought that was really cool. Might offer some versatility. I really don't know if it would work as well on a different paper, because again, this paper is very thin and it like helped that effect to like spread. And also because I put so much ink down, it ended up like spreading like it bled through the page and it bled through another page. So one of my Pokemon from last week's videos got ink on it. But yeah, this is my character Zeke drawn with a glass dip pen. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you'd consider getting this pen. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all next week.